And welcome to the Gay Liberation Network here on Chicago Access Network Television. I'm Andy Thayer, your host with the Gay Liberation Network, and with us tonight is also
Brent Holman-Gomez, also with the Gay Liberation Network.
And as you'll see from our topic that you saw on your screen a little bit earlier, we're going to be talking about the recent appointment by Republican Governor Rauner of Democrat James Meeks, Reverend James Meeks. And Brent, I'd like to pitch it over to you. Why is it that people should have a problem with this appointment by Governor Rauner?
James Meeks has a history of saying incendiary things about LGBT people, as well as other people in our populace, such as gayness is an evil sickness. He has fought against schools that provide safe harbor for LGBTs, and against the anti-bullying rules that we've got here in the state. So basically he potentially could create a schooling system that is even less positive for our LGBT youth. And given what we've been even more aware of in the last few years of the number of suicides and the bullying that goes on in schools, it's much too big of a risk to take in the current environment to put someone like this in charge of the statewide Board of Education.
It should be noted, he's also very much a school privatizer. He opposes public education in terms of, he's a big one for promoting charter schools, promoting public monies going to religious institutions running those schools. Essentially, it turns into an attack on union rights and decent conditions for our public school teachers, which I think our friends not only in the Chicago Teachers Union, but all the teachers unions around the state should be very much concerned about. He's part and parcel in that respect of an attack on public unions, which Governor Rauner just recently announced in his State of State address, where he basically is going to try and turn Illinois into one version or another of a so-called right-to-work state, a union-busting state is what he's looking for, in my opinion.
Yep. And, there are other aspects of LGBTQ equality that get thrown into that mix. When you have a parochial school, a religious school that the children are going to, they are more likely to not be supported when they recognize their identity as an LGBTQ person. And so using state funds increasingly to fund schools that do not provide these safe places, as well as being, putting someone as a titular head of the state education system that is, out and out anti-gay, we think is just extremely, you're playing with fire.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people probably know, to the extent they know anything about Reverend Meeks in terms of his views on gays, is that he was one of the foremost opponents of the Civil Unions Bill, and of course the Marriage Equality Bill that came after that. But more than that, he has steadfastly opposed equal employment rights, equal housing rights, equal access to public accommodations for LGBTs as well. In essence, he's said that we are non-people. And I think that for someone to be appointed to an educational position and to have that kind of track record of opposing civil rights for any group of people, whether it's LGBTs, Asian Americans, Latinos, African Americans, whoever, that, in my opinion, should send a signal to everyone in our state that you need to oppose this nomination, that Bruce Rauner is essentially trying to do a very tricky move here. He's saying, let me pluck a bigoted Democrat that the Democratic state legislature, in this case the Senate, will be hesitant to not approve. And let me just dangle that out there. And I think we have to say to the Democratic-controlled Senate, and they control literally 68% of the seats. I mean, it should be a no-brainer stopping this nomination if they truly want to live up to their alleged reputation of being pro-LGBT. We have to say, it doesn't make any difference if this guy is a professed Democrat or whatever part of affiliation he's talking about right now, as he's been appointed by Governor Rauner. He needs to be opposed.
The Illinois Safe Schools Alliance has written a letter I think addressed to the senators, that calls into question Meeks' background as well. And in that letter, they point out that he not only GLBTs but other minority groups such as Latinos and women and I can't remember what other ethnicities at the moment, but they have some specific examples of him attacking other groups too. So, we want to send our children to schools where each of them, no matter their color, no matter their ethnicity, no matter their sexual orientation or religion, that they are going to have a safe place that they can go to and learn as much as they can.
Okay, well, let's take a quick break, and we're going to bring up an announcement about a very important activity happening tomorrow. And this is connected to Chicago's history, unfortunately, of supporting police torturers. One John Burge, who, according to the Sun-Times today, was just released from a halfway house. And yet so many of Commander John Burge's torture victims, almost all of whom were African-American men, are still awaiting any kind of restitution from the state authorities. Sometimes it can be very difficult proving the torture when it's done behind closed doors. And so while we've paid out millions and millions of dollars to many victims of police torture in this city and continuing to do so, there's still many who are suffering psychological stress and so forth. And so there has been a bill that has been before the city council for several months now. It's locked up in committee, the notorious finance committee, I believe it is. One Alderman Burke is being the villain there. And this bill calls for modest reparations for these torture victims and their families. And this rally is going to be happening from 1 to 3 p.m. tomorrow at the Chicago Temple. The address is coming right up on their screen there, 77 West Washington Boulevard. So please come out to this rally tomorrow. It's 1 to 3 p.m. You'll be glad you did. You're supporting and trying to move beyond then Chicago's notorious record of police racism and police torture. So I believe we've got a caller on the KNTV. Yes.
Good evening. Is it okay to call you Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. If
Andy.
you call me Mr. Thayer, I'll look for my dad.
Okay, Andy.
Yes, sir.
People think these body cams on police officers is going to be a solution to all the problems. No, it's not. It's a start. And what I want to say is this: we need to have a complete independent police review board that do not get their funding from the police department, and to have more than just ex-police officers on those committees. And if we have that, or like they do in New York City, where if you have a police officer that has violated people's civil rights, where you could sue them, where you could get part of their pension, their homes, and all that. If you notice what happened in New York City, pretty much stop and frisk is dead. Okay, all those type of what they thought in terms of a police method, in terms of controlling crime, in terms of like stop and frisk and racial profiling, it had pretty much stopped, because when a police officer realized that pensions involved, they lose their home. Now, if we're going to have a complete a police review board, or they should allow us to be able to sue police officers where they don't have this immunity from the state.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you, caller. I think it should be noted that, as you mentioned, the whole issue of these body cams didn't help Eric Garner, the Staten Island police murder victim. Body cams did not help. I mean, they weren't on the police officer, they were on a civilian. Actually, the civilian in Eric Garner's case was the only one who was arrested in that situation. Rodney King, an infamous incident back in the last century that really sparked a whole new wave of anti-police brutality organizing, his beating was caught on videotape, and it didn't help him. And so I think that any kind of reforms that we're looking for are only small steps in the right direction. As long as we've got the kind of inequality that we see in our city and in our country, you're going to have police who's charged with maintaining that inequality. That's the role of the police in our society. It's not as social workers. And until you deal with that inequality, everything you do around the edges in terms of body cams or even getting a civilian police review board and so forth is just going to be working around the edges. But we've got another caller here, so let's try and take this caller here too.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, the guy who just called you, about they need body cameras. That ain't gonna help. Okay, the reason why they ain't gonna help because they ain't gonna have they're gonna help the police, but they ain't gonna help nobody else. Look what happened like Harry Gunn.
That's right.
And they still doing it out here. Police still doing it out here. South Carolina and Pittsburgh, they still down there. The police don't believe the police before they believe the victim. Yeah,
Well,
y'all doing a good job.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you, caller. We certainly hope you make it out to the rally tomorrow, 1 to 3 p.m. at the Chicago Temple, 77 West Washington. Getting back to the issue of Reverend James Meeks and his appointment, the thing that strikes me about this particular appointment, in addition to his anti-gay stance, his anti-union stance, his anti-public education stance, is that once again we're having a head of education who's got no history in terms of his career as being an educator in the classroom, as being someone who's trained in education. And he joins a long line of these clowns who are particularly being pushed. I mean,
He's similar
Arnie Duncan, who was the running mate for Governor Quinn, and Quinn wondered why he didn't get the kind of full-throated backing against someone as evil as Rauner.
Right.
Well, look at your running mate, Union Buster Arnie Duncan.
Meeks is similar to Governor Rauner in that respect, in that he's viewed as an education activist, but has never actually, held a career or as far as we know, taught anything, and so there's some reason why Rauner would select him. You can sign a petition to get the Illinois Democratic Senate to stop the confirmation of Reverend James Meeks. And here on your screen coming up is the URL of where you can find that on the web.
If it'll come up, there we go.
You can also visit GLN's Facebook page for a connection there, but right there in front of you is a direct link to the change.org petition that we started. And
and it's very important because we need to weigh in this. A lot of people are wrapped up in the mayoral campaign, they're wrapped up in the aldermanic races, and that's certainly a lot of very important issues being dealt with there. But we're about to have, as our top educator in the entire state of Illinois, someone who is dedicated to opposing equality for LGBTs, who's dedicated to dwindling down our already besieged public education system. So go to that website there and sign that petition and share it with your friends as well. I believe we've got another caller here. Yes, caller, you're on CAN TV. What's your question or comment, please?
Well, I was just listening for the first time about Meeks. And I'm not a very religious person. I have my, but since a teacher in the religious arena, I can't see why he would teach anything but love the next person as opposed to learn about what your sexual preference is.
Okay, so it's a little difficult to hear you, ma'am. Did you understand what she was saying?
no, I did not understand you.
Could you repeat that quickly, please, ma'am?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, please, ma'am.
I was just listening to you all talk about Reverend Meeks and, his comments toward lesbian gays. And as a pastor, and being in the religious arena, I would love for mankind. I don't understand why he would call himself such a religious person that he loves all that.
Okay, ma'am, I believe we've got a bad line. Did you catch some of that?
I think you said that you are a pastor and you don't understand how James Meeks could be speaking so negatively about about humankind, including LGBTs, and we agree with that.
Yeah, well,
sentiment.
and unfortunately, religion is both used as a tool for good, but often used as a tool for bad as well. I mean, opponents of the civil rights movement in the South, one very notorious one, Jerry Falwell, who later went on to have an anti-gay career. He called the civil rights movement the quote-unquote civil wrongs movement. And there were a lot of white racist pastors who opposed civil rights for African Americans. And it's our belief in the Gay Liberation Network that you have to be for everyone's rights. I mean, LGBTs are not just white, they're not just Latino, they're African American, they're Asian American. There were all different religions, and if we don't stand up for every single one in our rainbow community, then we not only hurt LGBTs, but we feed into the negativity. And unfortunately, it's not good enough to just speak up for your own group. You have to speak up for all groups, or you're not deserving of that kind of solidarity. And unfortunately, Reverend Meeks comes from a tradition of I'm only concerned with my group right here in my congregation. And you have gays who are like that as well. I was having a Facebook conversation with someone today who says, well, I've ran into so many racist white gays, and I had to say, yes, unfortunately, they very much do exist. But the question is whether or not we continue down that negative road, or we actually support everyone who's fighting for their rights, everyone who's fighting for their freedom.
One of the great solidarity aspects of this of our struggles together has been the labor movement, and the gay movement and labor movement have lots of historic ties. But here on the screen you can see a poster from the 1970s of a boycott of Coors beer, which Coors was at that time owned by this family that was very anti-gay. And supported many efforts to rid society of LGBT influence, and also was having a strike with their union that was in their brew houses. So one of the leading characters in uniting these two, the LGBT issues and the union issues, was Harvey Milk, the storied first elected openly gay representative in the United States in San Francisco. And here are some pictures from his life. The more recently than Harvey Milk's action with the Coors thing, unions also in the 1990s were extremely instrumental in getting domestic partner benefits passed in many corporations throughout the country, and basically giving similar benefits to couples as to what married couples have for our LGBT people, long before any legality of our marriages became possible. And so unions have been a way that we have been able to unite together to bring greater freedoms for all people, including LGBTs. And so the Reverend Meeks anti-union stance, as well as his anti-LGBT stance, is something that we need to be focused on and make a lot of sense.
We are coming up on Valentine's weekend, and for those who don't know, that has traditionally been Freedom to Marry weekend every other year for...
Be mine, Andy!
You got a partner, I got one too, so hands up, bud. We've got some pictures here of some previous Freedom to Marry protests coming up on your screen here. And the issue was that basically LGBTs couldn't get married in this state until last year. This is a protest we had out in front of Holy Name Cathedral because of the Catholic hierarchy, once again, religion being used for evil, even though most Catholic laity supported LGBT rights. Unfortunately, the hierarchy, including our cardinal at that time, opposed it. Unfortunately, the current cardinal does as well. And this led to some pretty interesting activism over the years. This thing coming up on your screen here is a banner drop that we did from the roof of the county building. It says Marriage Rights Now. And this is something that we did. We can safely talk about it now because the statute of limitations is over with. We got up to the top of the county building and we demonstrated for our civil rights. And right here then is another protest. Again, I believe it was that same year. And but getting back to our topic in terms of talking about James Meeks, we don't have a lot of time left here. But what would be the main thing you'd like to leave people with in terms of why they should oppose his nomination and what they should do about it?
Would you want to attend school that you know is led by someone who hates you?
Mm-hmm. Who basically is opposed to your equal rights. I mean, this is really what it's about. And so we encourage people to go to the website, sign the petition here to say to the Illinois State Senate, do not vote in favor of this nomination for Reverend James Meeks. He is singularly ill-suited to become Illinois' next top educator. And then finally, I'd also like to bring up, again, the very, very important rally tomorrow. This is for the reparations bill before the city council. And this is something that is designed to give some modest financial compensation as well as social services to police torture victims. Over 100 African-American men, almost all of them African-American men, were tortured by Chicago Police Commander John Burge, who today, according to the Sun-Times, was released from a halfway house. It's a disgrace that John Burge is out, and yet these men, many of whom have spent a decade or more in prison, are still not getting the kind of social services that they deserve. And we have just a little bit of time left. I'd like to close out our show by discussing a very important loss that we had in our international LGBT community. And that is the death a few days ago of Nelson Arambu. Nelson was a Honduran LGBT leader. For those who do not know anything about Honduras, it's one of the poorest countries in the world. It's also the most violent country in the world in terms of murder rate. Nelson died of a swelling in the head. It could have been perhaps as a result of injuries he had received in the past, but so many of Nelson's colleagues have been murdered in the struggle for freedom of the Honduran people. Honduras has been undergoing this horrible wave of violence ever since the United States and our own President Obama supported a coup that overthrew the elected government in 2009, leading to having the highest murder rate in the world. And we were very honored, along with the Chicago Religious Leadership Task Force, as well as La Voz de los del Bajo, to host this meeting with Nelson when he came to Chicago last July. And here's just a few pictures. Our heart goes out to our Honduran colleagues. Nelson, I found, was just a very warm person, a very intelligent person, and a very humble person. I mean, it's rare. Those of you who have been involved in political activity, it's rare to find a humble person in politics. And Nelson was not only sharp as a whip, but he was a very honorable person. Rest in peace, Nelson.
Yeah, rest in peace.
So we're going to have to sign off here. Just want to say some thank yous to those who helped make tonight's show possible. Thanks, and we'll see you in about a month's time as well.
Happy Valentine's Day!